Hello everyone, this is Adam from Leatherhead District Scouts, and in this video I'm going to be showing you and introducing you to a number of different plants and trees that are useful plants. They have uses, whether that is for fire lighting, whether that is for food, for medicine, or for other kind of survival and bushcraft situations. So there are lots of different plants that I'm going to introduce you to on my walk today, and hopefully you can go and find some of these when you're out and about doing your own walks. There are a lot of plants and a lot of trees that are useful for fire lighting in English woodland, and one that you're probably most familiar with is this tree that's behind me, which is the silver birch. As Malcolm went through in one of our videos, the bark of the silver birch contains lots and lots of resin, lots of oils, which is really fantastic for fire lighting. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at this tree. So yes, as its namesake, the silver birch does have silver bark. They grow in lots and lots of different types of English woodland, and you can often see quite a few of them in glades in England. If we get a little bit closer, you can see the silver, the white, kind of flaky bark of the silver birch tree. Now, this tree is an old tree, but it's still living. So we don't want to be stripping the bark off of this living tree. Like all resources that we use and that we find in the outdoors, we never want to strip it of its resources that it needs to continue to grow. So instead of taking the bark off of this tree, you should look for dead or dying silver birch trees. Firstly, the bark will peel off much easier on a dead and a dying tree, and you can use that with a knife to gently peel off the layers of the bark. And then when you're all done with that, you can let it dry, and you'll end up with a nice pile of shavings like this, which are all dry and they're perfect, and they'll be ready for fire lighting. So the silver birch tree, great bark for fire lighting. You can also tap its wood for its sap. You can make containers out of the bark, and it's a very, very useful plant and tree to know about. This is an old dead silver birch tree that I've just come across, and this will be really good for harvesting some of the that bark that we can use for fire lighting. It's a little bit rotten, but there's a good little supply there for us to use later. Another common plant that you'll see in English woodlands and also hedgerows is hawthorn. It is a thorny bush and a thorny plant. Sometimes they can be quite small, like this one that's behind me. Other times they can grow quite large. Now this plant has edible leaves, and the leaves are very much kind of like a salad leaf. You can try them. They have a slightly bitter taste, slightly greeny taste, and they're quite nice added to things like wraps. If you're out eating some wraps with some chorizo maybe, you can put a handful of them in some salads. With a lot of plants, you want to eat the leaves when the plant is young and when the leaves are young. So that means essentially trying to find leaves that are the smaller leaves, because they'll be less bitter, they'll be less kind of astringent to the taste. So let's have a look at one. So this is the hawthorn leaf. Let's have a little bit of a closer up look of this. And there are small thorns on the branches as well. These will grow in when the plant matures, and also when the berries start to grow as well. So if we're looking for a smaller leaf to try and sample, let's try and find one. Let's see. This one's a younger leaf. We can try that now. So got ourselves a young leaf. It's edible, does have a greeny flavour. It's nice. You can have a handful of them in salads. The younger ones aren't as bitter as the older ones get. And as I did mention, this plant does have berries as well. They're very recognisable, almost look a little bit like rose-hipped kind of berries. Now you can't eat those berries without processing them, because the seeds have very small hairs which cause irritation in the throat, and in fact quite a few years ago itching powder was made out of the seeds. So you can do a little bit more research into how you can use hawthorn berries, but you can make hawthorn leather, fruit leathers. You can make hawthorn kind of jam, process it like that out of it, but only if you process it to get rid of those berries. So when you're out and about on a walk or a hike with scouts maybe, it's nice to be able to just stop and identify some of the things that are around you. Like we've got some cow parsley here, and obviously being able to spot that hawthorn bush back there. So it's useful little bits of knowledge and information that you can use. You'll often spot this hanging over rivers and paths. This is part of the willow family. Different parts of the willow tree are useful. For example, the bark of the willow tree has you can chew on that, and it has a medicinal property which is very similar to aspirin. You can also use the different parts of the willow tree and these thin bits of branch that come down here for different types of cordage as well. So a plant with a few different uses. There are lots and lots of useful plants that are in the English woodland, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience and to open your eyes a little bit more to be able to spot them. So there's a plant down here next to me that some of you might mistake for stinging nettles. So I'll introduce you to garlic mustard, or Jack by the hedge now. So some of you might see why this plant might get confused with stinging nettles, because the leaves look very, very similar. If I take this one for example, stinging nettles have sharper serrated edges of the leaves. These leaves are slightly greener and they have a waxy, a glossy feel to them, whereas stinging nettle leaves are a bit more matted and they feel obviously bristly, because stinging nettles have hairs underneath, whereas garlic mustard doesn't have hairs on its leaf or on its stem as well. So this is quite a big clump of garlic mustard. So garlic mustard is a really nice salad plant to be able to identify, because all of the plant is edible. You can eat the flowers, you can eat the leaves, although the younger, smaller leaves are better because they hold their flavour, whereas the older leaves tend to get a little bit too bitter in their older age. But the younger leaves have a nice kind of rocket-like pepperiness with garlic undertones. But you can also use the rest of the plant a bit like spinach, so you can take, say, top of the plant and wilt it and steam it, nice with butter, and you can also put it in lots of other dishes as well and use the leaves like salad leaves. The root is said to have a very strong taste of horseradish, so if you do like that kind of real peppery, fiery flavour, then that's ideal for you. But obviously bear in mind that it is illegal to uproot and dig up plants that are out here in the kind of common land. So I'm just going to grab a leaf just to give you guys a little bit of what it tastes like. So it's a little bit of young garlic mustard leaf. So instantly it has a very kind of rockety flavour, a rockety taste, but there is a little hint of garlic in there too. So yes, that would be nice in salads, and that'd be nice with some butter wilted like you would spinach. So is this a grass or is it a sedge? This is in fact pendulus sedge. You can almost see why it gets its pendulous name, because of these seed pods that are drooping downwards. You get them, they kind of look a little bit like grasses and wheat almost, because they have these fronds that come out in big bunches. But there's one key identifier for how you can tell that this is a sedge and not a grass. So one key identifier for checking out whether this is a grass or a sedge. All sedges are edible or have edible parts. One thing is, sedges have edges, and what I mean by that is the part of the sedge, so where you get those seed pods, they actually have edges. They look like, if you were to cut them in half, a triangle. So that's one real key identifier for the sedge family. Obviously grasses will have a round stem that comes up, so you can almost immediately tell the difference as to whether it's a sedge, because sedges have edges. So let's see whether I can give you a little bit of a demonstration. So I can grab this here on the stem and I can gently pull, and you can see it brings out this. Let me see if I can actually get this into focus for you. Oh, come on. There we go. So you actually end up with this stem. And this stem, I'm trying to get it into focus for you, but this stem does have a ridge. It just does have edges. It's not round. Let's see if I can do it this way to show you. You can just about see there that it's almost a triangle and not round. So now that we know that this is a sedge, a pendulous sedge, how can we use it? So first off, this white bit of the stem down here is edible, and it's a good little kind of like wayside nibble as you're walking through. Tastes a bit like kind of like a celery kind of taste. You don't get very much on it though, mainly just the white part of that stem. Now, this part here, the pendulous part, this will come in handy once all of this, once it's kind of pollinated. So in the springtime you can see that it starts to drop all of its pollen. When it has its seed pods, you can grind and winnow the seed pods and winnowing means you kind of rub it between two stones and you release the inner seed from its husk, and you can actually use that to make quite a nice tasting damper bread, a bit like a kind of rough wholemeal flour. So in times when like Mesolithic times of people in England, they would use the pendulus sedge to almost make a flour, so they could make a kind of unleavened type of bread. So another good plant to know. Sedges have edges and a good little wayside nibble. Let's go and see what else we can find. Something that I think is obviously quite important to mention is that I spent a long time studying these different wild plants, especially the ones that I'm eating. So this video isn't a kind of encouragement for you to go out and start foraging and eating lots of different plants, because unless you're 110% sure what they are, you could be putting something toxic into your body, and that's not very good. This kind of video, giving you some ideas, serves as an introduction to what the kind of wild British landscape can provide for you. You can use this knowledge for when you go out on a walk, or whether you're on a scout camp, and certainly if you're doing any kind of bushcraft activities. Encourage your leaders, or give yourself a little bit of an interest to go out and learn more about the purposes of and the uses of wild plants and wild foods and wild medicine as well, because there's so many different plants out there that can be used for so many different things, from plants that would be particularly good for friction fire lighting, to plants that can produce a type of sap that is very good for soap. Many years ago, British Mesolithic men and women and people were able to live off of this land with that kind of knowledge. So that's what I'm trying to do by learning and by giving you these little bits and nuggets of information to pass on. So enjoy it, learn what you can through observation and through some research, and when you are out on a walk, try and identify the plants and the trees that are around you. But remember, don't eat anything unless you're absolutely 100% sure what it is. And when I say that, I mean have somebody with you that knows what they're doing. It is quite amazing how quickly plants grow in the springtime. Behind me there weren't any stinging nettles here 2 weeks ago, and in another month's time they'll grow from being 20 centimetres off the ground to a metre or more tall. At this young age, stinging nettles, their leaves are very good eating. The best way to eat them is to wilt them over the fire, and that gets rid of those stinging hairs that everybody complains about. There are lots of different ways that you can consume nettles, and they're actually really high in vitamin C, more than lemons, more than oranges. Of all of the kind of wild plants that you can eat that's out there, nettles are one of the best in terms of the actual nutrients that you can get from them. So, oh hello. That's all right. So, young nettles like this, with gloves, or if you turn a sock inside out, you can pick them up, and they can hold them in your hand, and you can brush those over the fire, and that gets rid of the stings. By wilting them like that, you can steam them. You can make nice soups out of the nettle leaves. And obviously you can steep them in tea as well, in hot water. So essentially you need to do something just to get rid of those stinging hairs. Another really important use for them is when they are very tall, is you can make fibre out of the out of the nettles. You can make nettle cordage. So in a situation where you don't actually have any string, any paracord or twine or anything like that, nettle is your next best friend to be able to do that. So first of all, you want to find the nice big tall nettles, the ones that aren't too woody, aren't too old. You can strip them all of their leaves and of their hairs. Again, a glove or an old sock is really useful for that. You can then crush them and then peel them, so you're peeling away the inner kind of celery-like fibrous material, and then you're left with a more flexible outer bark. That bark can then be dried over a couple of hours in the sunshine or overnight, and then the next day you can soak them in some water to make them flexible, and you can plait them or you can twist them together to make a very, very strong cord or fibre, and essentially you can make that as long as you need it to be as well. So yeah, nettle, out of all of the plants in the English countryside, one of the most valuable resources that we have on our hands. This is a clump of young nettles, and you can almost see what I mean when I mention that the garlic mustard leaves are very similar. The leaves of the nettles are slightly pointier on the edges than the garlic mustard, and they have a darker colour, and obviously they have the stings that are underneath them as well, the little needles. So soon enough all of this will be a metre or so high. You can pick the tips of them. The nettle tips are the best bits for eating, and you can of course use the rest of the stem for making nettle cordage. We've got behind me a giant mass of brambles, and although there doesn't look like anything much now and the leaves are just starting to emerge, soon they'll be covered in lovely white flowers, and then after that, come late summer into the autumn, it'll be covered and covered and covered in blackberries. So they're lovely fruit, nice and sour and sweet, a great source of kind of sugar that you can get, and they're great just to be able to pick them up and eat them on your way around. So super easy edible fruit that you can all find and you can all enjoy. Obviously you'll want to be mindful of all of the barbs and the spiky needles that are on the branches, but if you can get a handful or so, or even more blackberries, you can be in for a nice sweet treat to make some bramble jam or apple and blackberry pie. You've got loads and loads of options, so I know that I'll be coming back here in the autumn time. There's another plant that is really common in fields and hedgerows and pretty much anywhere in England, including your garden, and this is it. These are cleavers. It's also known as goosegrass, but you probably know it as sticky willy. It's got tiny little hairs on the actual stem of this little plant. That means it kind of sticks to clothing. As scouts, when you're out and about or at a camp, you've probably thrown this at each other at some point, and it's stuck to the back of you. This is another edible plant. It's actually was a herb years and years and years ago. Because it actually was available throughout the winter months. So many years ago people used to keep it in their kitchens as a potted plant. So the cleavers. Now the older plants can get quite stringy and they're not very good eating. So you want to try and look for some of the younger plants, and I've got some down here next to me. So you'll see that actually down here amongst the stinging nettles there are some small cleavers down here. So this is the bud of the cleaver or the goosegrass, and it's still quite young in its plant age, and it's these kind of top bits of the plant that are the good bits for food. You can wilt them and steam them, and again, a bit like spinach, the wilting them in some steam gets rid of those sticky bits on the back of the leaves, and they're quite good with some butter. You can put them in some other dishes as a component of greens, but you want to be looking for the young one. So this is quite a young one, that's its kind of maximum length that you've got there. And you can kind of pick the top bit, and then this is our nice bit of cleaver that we've got that we can go back and wilt and eat later. One edible plant that you're likely to identify by smelling it rather than seeing it first is wild garlic, or ramsons, and these often grow by the side of streams and in dark and shady and damp woodland. It's particularly good eating. The leaves and the flowers have a really pungent garlicky taste, and they're great in salads, and they're lovely in pesto as well because they've got that lovely rich flavour. So let's take a look at those now. So this is the wild garlic, otherwise known as ramsons. They have really lovely, pretty, small, delicate white flowers that are like almost in the shape of a star. The flowers are edible. These are the leaves of wild garlic, which are also edible. But you kind of want to look for the younger leaves, like the smaller ones like this, rather than the bigger ones. The bigger ones tend to lose their flavour quite quickly. Out of all of the kind of wild foods and wild plants, wild garlic comes in and out of season really quickly, so you've got to be quite lucky to be able to find it. It does grow on the edges of paths, so one thing to bear in mind is obviously if you get any kind of like lots of people walking through or dogs, that kind of thing, because it does grow very close to the ground, you don't want to be picking them where other animals could have left some things behind. So I'll get quite close up, see if we can focus on the flower there. This is our wild garlic flower. They're very tasty, very pungent in garlicky flavour if you get them at the right time, and like I said, really nice in flowers are lovely in salads, but the leaves are great as a pesto and as a flavouring to things like chicken, and like you could almost use them like garlic butter. And they do grow in clumps as well. This is a small clump that I found next to a stream. So let's have a try of those flowers. Let's just get one of those. One way to tell that it is wild garlic is if you rub the leaves with your fingers and rub the flowers with your fingers, you can give them a smell and it'll be a faint garlicky smell as well. So I got says some of the wild garlic flower here. Just try this. Really pungent, strong garlicky flavour. Yeah, if you like garlic, it's really lovely. Almost got a little bit of a spring oniony taste as well. So yeah, certainly one to keep an eye out for. It's quite easy in this sea of white and blue, got the bluebells for in springtime to kind of oversee some of the smaller, more delicate little plants. And there's one which is another native English plant that I'd like to show you, which is called lady's smock. That's lady's smock, sorry. It's a really pretty, delicate little plant. It's another edible plant, yeah, let's take a look. So this is the flower of lady's smock. This lovely kind of like pinky purpley flower. Has 4 petals on it and some yellow stamens, and it's a really thin and narrow stalk. Its leaves are very delicate as well. If I show you these, very thin, very delicate leaves. And one thing to notice is that you don't get kind of 2 pairs of leaves coming off the stem at the same place. They come off slightly higher up and at 90 degrees to the previous leaf. So that's a good identifier for you. Now, the flowers of the plant are very kind of fiery. They've got a very kind of very hot taste to them, but the actual leaves to the lady's smock don't taste very nice at all. They taste a bit oily, and just to give you an idea of how easy it is to be missed, we've got it next to a cow parsley. Got next to it a cow parsley over here, and then actually over there in the distance we've got another lady's smock, but you probably wouldn't notice it in all of this. It's quite close to the ground, so you wouldn't necessarily notice it amongst all of the other colours, amongst all of the other plants as well. So for lady's smock, definitely don't eat the leaves, and I'd reserve the flowers for maybe a sprinkling on a salad, but probably nothing more than that. My phone just died during recording, which isn't ideal, but just wanted to give you a little idea. So we've got a tiny little piece of the lady's smock here. Not a very nice taste, definitely oily, not very good flavour. I wouldn't recommend it. Ugh. But we can try the leaves, the flowers instead. Let's get some of them. So it's a lady smock flower. Let's try that. It's nice. Definitely got some heat to it. I think I'd prefer the wild garlic. I didn't really think that this plant needed much explaining, because many people know that the leaves are edible, which they are. You want to eat the leaves when they're small and when they're young. They have a slight bitter taste, and when they're old they don't taste very nice at all. If you were to dry out the flowers, you can actually use the petals and the stamens of a dandelion to make a jelly, a bit like a marmalade. And everyone that I know is quite familiar with a drink called dandelion and burdock, and the dandelion part of that drink comes from the root of the dandelion down in the ground down there, and the root can be dug up and it can be used for a drink because it has a kind of coffee caffeine-y flavour, which is a good substitute if you don't have any coffee with you for your morning brew. I've so far mentioned quite a lot of plants and trees that are useful for food, but one tree that is actually quite useful for shelter is the yew tree. So I'm standing under one now. I'll take a look at it from the outside in a moment. Characteristically grows in churchyards, but you do find it in English forests. It has really big, thick boughs of needle-like leaves. They're actually like needles. And they're very, very good for sheltering under. It was raining a few moments ago, so I quickly hopped under here and I'm still completely dry. So yes, yew tree is a very good one to know. And there's lots of space under here as well. As you can see, I can kind of like move around. The yew tree is actually, like a lot of the yew tree, is poisonous, so don't go eating any of the leaves or anything like that. Just like different aisles of a supermarket or a shop, different forests can give you different resources and different tools and different plants. So I've walked a little bit further and I'm going to try and see what I can find in regards to other resources that we might be able to find. So you'll find this type of fungi on dead or dying ash trees, and it's just under here. We can get a close up in a minute. It's called Daldenia concentrica. It's also known as King Alfred Cakes, or cramp balls, and it's not an edible mushroom or fungus. They're really useful because they can catch a spark and they're fantastic for fire lighting, and they're also used many years ago to help tribes transport fire when they were moving from camp to camp. So let's take a closer look. These are the cramp balls that are the fungi that are on the bottom of dying ash trees, and what I'm going to do is to just check that they're kind of dry and they're not moist. You don't want moist ones. Oh. Now that one is better. Let's see if we can get a better look at this. Get a close up. Come on. Where's my focus? Yeah, so can you see the concentric rings on the inside? That will help catch a spark, which I'll demonstrate now. So this is a King Alfred cake. This is what the inside looks like, but these ones are a little bit actually too damp to use straight away. They're not catching a spark as you would expect. So these ones can be kept and they can be dried inside, and they'll be really useful for catching a spark. This one here, this King Alfred cake, it's you want to look for kind of darker ones, so more towards black. The younger ones and the slightly moister ones will be slightly brown in colour, like this one. They feel slightly heavier as well, where they're holding more moisture. Ones that you'll want to try and avoid are ones that are going kind of like a milky black, a little bit grey colour, because they'll start to fall apart and they won't be any good if they're just a bunch of dust in your pocket. So I've tried lighting this one with no avail. I'll have to dry that one indoors, not in an airing cupboard, otherwise you'll get mushroom spores everywhere. So this one's drier. We're going to give this one a go. Give it a shower of sparks. So we've actually got a little bit of heat coming off of that now. Let's try again. So that's now smoking. We actually have quite a hot ember there as well. So that's some really useful and handy plants that you can use for fire lighting, for medicine, and also for food. Remember that when you're out and about, it's really good to be able to identify this, but obviously don't eat anything, especially if you don't know what it is. If you want to learn more, then I recommend the Ray Mears Wild Food book, and also try and attend one of the bushcraft courses as well, because that will give you a lot better understanding of what wild food is available in the forests of England. So thank you very much for watching, and yeah, carry on scouting. There are, of course, loads and loads and loads, hundreds of plants that all have uses for different things across the UK and across the world. So the ones that I've gone into detail with you in this video are sometimes you particularly find them in the springtime, and obviously come the summer and the autumn you'll start to get the nuts, the seeds and the fruit bodies. So you'll get your apples, your crab apples and your cherries and all of your nice natural sweet goodness and fruits from the plants as well. So this video has been shot in springtime, and well, who knows, maybe I'll make another one come the autumn for all of the different things that you can try and find out there too.